Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to Antonie Rietzschel, today's speaker. Welcome to Mirjana Tomić, the author and moderator of this series. This is the next part of the series European Contexts, which is a cooperation series of talks and seminars between Press Club Concordia, Forum for Journalism and Media in Vienna, and sponsored by Erste Stiftung and made possible by Erste Stiftung. Big thanks at the beginning, because it's really important to have that support. And in close cooperation, I want to mention the Institute for Human Sciences. Hello, Ivan. We are talking about understanding the context of what is going on in Europe and beyond. And today we have a very important topic. We are talking about the election results in Eastern Germany and the implications of the AfD success. Also, we are talking about what does that mean for the media and for journalists. Our guest is Antonie Rietzschel. Hello, Antonie. She is an award-winning journalist and an East German insider and has been investigating the far-right political developments for almost a decade. There will be time for Q&A. There will be a talk between Mirjana Tomić and Antonie in the beginning, and then there will be time for Q&A as always. And please note that we do record this series, this talk, and will broadcast it via YouTube later. That is it from my side at the beginning. I'm Daniela Kraus, by the way, from Press Club Concordia here in Vienna. Welcome to everyone. And I hand over to Mirjana Tomić, whom most of you know.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Good morning, Antonie. Good morning to our audience. And as Daniela said, I'm the author and moderator of seminars on current political affairs and media in Europe. Our speaker today is Antonie Rietzschel. Just a few words. She studied political science in Bremen. She worked for Spiegel Online, Tagesspiegel. She worked for Süddeutsche Zeitung. She worked first in Munich and then in Berlin. And she is originally from East Germany, from a small town where, from what I understand, the far-right ideas were always present. And she returned in 2017 to East Germany, to Leipzig, to understand what is really happening in East Germany. She's now working for Leipziger Volkszeitung, and her main research is on AfD and the extreme groups in Germany. She does a lot of investigative reporting, and I would like to say just that we had Antonie several times, and in 2018, she came to Vienna together with other experts on the far right, and many things that she said then actually were repeated now after the AfD had electoral success into East German states, in Thuringia and Saxony. So one asks what happened in the meantime. Just to mention that on the 22nd of September, there will be elections in Brandenburg, and AfD is also expected, according to the polls, to have about 29%. For a start, Antonie, I think since we have a lot of people who do not live in Germany or Austria, please give us a very short overview. What is the main difference between East and West Germany, but more from the point of view of perception rather than facts, industrial GDP? What is the main difference? How do we understand this East German specificities, so to say? Please, Antonie.
Well, I can start with, like, as you said, I live in Leipzig, for example, which is a big city. And as you all know, we had the wall up and we had GDR times. And in the 90s, when the wall came down, people here were struggling really much with their lives and trying to rebuild their lives. And in the meantime, people from West Germany, for example, came to Leipzig because they thought, okay, we could buy some nice houses here in Leipzig. It will be investment in the future. And for example, the big difference here in Leipzig is that you can see is the influence, for example, from West Germany, where people are saying, like, when you meet them, okay, we've been colonized, kind of. So West Germans coming over and buying houses. So the housing market, for example, in Leipzig is mainly dominated by West Germans. I'm paying my rent to Munich, for example, to someone. And this is something where people feel like, okay, we're not really in power, in charge of what we are doing here. And then you have all the other facts, of course. Yeah, that of course, if I would go home, or if you would go for Saxonia, you have these two big cities, Dresden and Leipzig, but mostly I live in a little village, and then you have all these not very rural places where people are much more, conservative or even right-winged, and where all the protests were in the last years, and where now we have, and all the right-winged societies had their connections, and now you have very strong votings for AfD. In the past, you had very strong votings for right-winged extremists like the NPD. We had the NPD in parliament, which is a right-winged extremist party already in East Germany, which was very strong. So yeah, you have and you see when you go to protests, when I'm very often outside, like during the Corona pandemic or during the war when the war started in Ukraine, you had these protests. Also, which were like not only about concerns, but also people are saying, okay, the state, we're not trusting any institutions. Politicians, they have to be handcuffed, and they have to get behind bars for what they did. So and also like regarding me as a media, they would call me like Lügenpresse or system media. So I was part of the system. So people, they don't really trust in institutions, not really in democracy. Like they are good with the democracy, they support democracy, but they have a different approach regarding democracy. And they think if we, for example, take the streets like in 1989, perhaps you remember like the peaceful revolution where people were overthrowing a system. Now, sometimes they have the feeling when they go to the streets that this has an impact. So the politicians have to act. And we are at the point now where people even think that they are at a point where they are able to overthrow, or they have to overthrow a system. So yeah, these are only some kind of parts of my experiences from the last years.
AfD has won over 30%, sorry, in Thuringia, and about in 30 in Saxonia. My question is, could you just give us an overview? Is it a Nazi party? Are there big differences within the party? I understand that the candidate of AfD for Brandenburg for the elections this Sunday, he's openly talking about deporting people, about immigration. On the other hand, some businessmen say we do not have enough people to work for us. So it's a bit of a paradox. Some Western media, when they read the results of the elections in East Germany, immediately thought of Nazism. Are we exaggerating? Is it a new phenomenon? Could you please give us an overview of how does it feel on the ground?
So yeah, you have the mother party, like for whole Germany, which is like very divided in like East and West Germany. Like the Western Germans, they're more, well, I don't know much about them, but my experience is always like they are not this right-winged as, for example, East Germany. For example, here you have Saxonia, Thuringia, and Sachsen-Anhalt. Those part of the parties are labeled actually by the state right-winged extremism, like the party, but that doesn't mean that all the people are labeled the same way. But of course, you have like people who would play with kind of the rhetoric. For example, you have Björn Höcke, who was propagating. Björn Höcke is from Thuringia, and he's very popular. He has a lot of influence in the party. Who was playing with the rhetorical thing like everything for Germany, which is actually a sentence that's related back to the NS time. But he would say, "Oh, I didn't know about it." Of course, he knows about it. Then here in Saxonia, you would go to a party meeting where a guy who was actually a former judge would go on stage and say like, if everybody else is not getting, well, I cannot quote it, it doesn't matter, but it also goes back to the SS, and they're playing with these kind of rhetorical stuff, and people like Björn Höcke you could clearly label as right-wing extremists, but then at the same time, and that's what I guess is the same for Austria as well, that they are that they're not openly, actually they try not openly to use this kind of rhetoric stuff. They would talk about Bevölkerungsaustausch in Germany, like that there's actually a plan where elites are trying to push in migrants and to destroy the German folk, like our society. Like there's a plan, which is a right-winged narration, but it's hard to explain to people why this is right-wing extremist. And people are taking over this kind of narratives that they were like, yeah, elites are doing this. So this is like the difference. And Saxonia, for example, they really try to be very because here they struggle with the conservative party. So you have like AfD is very strong and the conservatives are very strong. So they try to take over people from the conservative party. So they try to be to seem conservative and not very extreme in how they talk. The difference is in Thüringen, where you have Björn Höcke, who's very open about it. And the difference is also in Brandenburg. You also already said it, like the guy who is in charge there, he is a right-wing extremist. He's openly working with right-wing extremist networks. He has no problem to do so. In Saxonia, for example, they don't want that.
Well, wonderful picture. There is one phenomenon that we have seen both in Thuringia and Saxonia, and I think we shall see it in Brandenburg, and that is the phenomenon of the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, or a Bündnis in German. Mm. She came from the left side of this political spectrum. She believes in social state, but she believes she propagates, let's say, more conservative values. She also propagates a control of migration, and she's against sending weapons to Ukraine. Could you explain this play between Sarah Wagenknecht, who the party was founded only 6 months ago? She got 15%, 11% in Saxonia, and she's expecting to get 14% in Brandenburg. Could you explain this way? Does it really matter to people if it's right or left, or it is only about migration, Ukraine, and feeling that people in East Germany are second-class citizens?
I think it's more about the circumstance that in East Germany, people are not very set on parties. So they more tend to switch. They don't have this tradition in West Germany. If my father was voting the Social Democrats, I'm going to vote the Social Democrats. Here you don't have this tradition. So there's more space for experiments. And Sarah Wagenknecht, I think AfD and Sarah Wagenknecht are still two different parties, even if they have the same topics like migration and Ukraine. But the AfD was not, because they struggled about their position regarding Ukraine, if they would like support sending weapons to Ukraine or not. So they really struggled from the inside. And Sarah Wagenknecht, her position was very clear. And she understood that, for example, in East Germany, people are very different. They have a different stance towards a conflict in Ukraine and towards Russia. So she made this her main narrative, that she's the one, like, come to me. She's like a very strict, if you see her, you would say she's like a very strict mother, and she would like, okay, come to me and I give you, like, I will be your leader, and I will be the one, the voice of reason and all of this, because nobody else is like listening to you. So people turned to her, and because of the leftist party, they really struggled from the inside also on their position towards Ukraine. So she took all the people from there. We don't have we're not having any leftist party left. Like, we don't have a classical left party. Right now, we don't have that now. So And we always thought, and that was kind of a misperception, I think, also from the media, because we thought, okay, because when you would go to the events and you would ask like people what they think about AfD and Sarah Wagenknecht, they would say, I could not decide whether Alice Weidel, I would like Alice Weidel, so the head of the AfD in Germany, or Sarah Wagenknecht more. So they would like, so we would always think, perhaps in the elections, the AfD would lose to Sarah Wagenknecht, but actually that wasn't the case. Like also in European elections, they didn't lose that much to AfD, and also in the federal elections right now, they didn't lose, because I think still, and Sarah Wagenknecht is making this very clear, that she's not going to work together with AfD, and they're very careful with picking their people, that there's still like this wall between them. And so even if they're very close together also regarding institutions and democracy, that Sarah Wagenknecht also thinks, she's also like using this, okay, this elite up there, they are trying to destroy us, they're not listening to you. And also having her stance on migration, they have that in common, but at the same time she's still like is making having a clear stance towards AfD.
Can you just tell us this attitude of East Germans towards Russia, why it is different in respect to West Germany, and to what extent do you think there is really Russian information war in Germany that is being very successful, or we are exaggerating the influence of Russian propaganda in Germany specifically?
I think this is more like what you would say, like the experience towards Russia is more like at the first, it seems a little bit irrational and very emotional. I was very surprised when I went to the protests. You must understand, like right now we're in a situation where like in every little city, every Monday, also like in tradition of the protests on 1989, people would take the streets like with flags of Russia. And for example, I was in Russia, I lived there for several times, and I would go there and people would like say, and I saw like how journalists had to work there and how hard it is and everything. And I would go there and people would say like, yeah, Russia was always our friend and we always supported.
Excuse me, Antonie, did I understand you correctly that now every Monday they're
in the past that was the case, but still but when the war broke out, and then there was this, we had like this, like it's a tradition from Corona pandemics, and then when the war came, they just, which is also an example for all these protests can switch all the time, like they only need a new, like there needs a new topic, and then there can be something else, like Corona, like migrants, Corona, and then the war, and they were tending to Russia, and they would say like they always have been our friends, and it's not like, oh, we are concerned or something. It's like we always have to stand with, like we stood with Russia, and how can it be that we are not making any we are not having any talks with Russia, and people even denying like the fact that Russia is actually the offender, and that not Ukraine or the NATO is the offender. And if you would talk to them, like, how is it that they are how they haven't even been to Russia, but at the same time you have this connection because of the past, of course, like remember GDR times, we were part of the Soviet Union and Russian soldiers were here. But the very irrational thing about it, that actually if you would ask people before the war about their experiences with Russians or soldiers of the Soviet Union, or that they had to learn Russian in school and stuff like that, they would actually like make fun of this, or they would like have very negative narrations about it. But now there is this myth that actually we are part, or like in our hearts as East Germans, we're always like been connected to Russia, which is also a very, very simple view, because the Soviet Union, of course, was not only Russia, it was so many different countries, even Ukraine. So if you would feel connected to East Europe, you could also say, okay, like we stand with Ukraine because of that. But what is behind this, like, it's like a big myth that people would make up, or like would tell you. It's like a great narrative that also the AfD is pushing, and also, as you said, propaganda. But what is behind this is actually a huge amount of anti-Americanism, because during GDR times, of course, people were told that the aggressor is actually the USA, like the US. And so this is still imprinted in society. So people here, a lot of people here think, even supporting Sarah Wagenknecht, that actually that the war was started because of the NATO. And I mean, you could also always discuss the role of NATO and stuff like this, but it's very clear that they are like, okay, the NATO, if they would not have provoked Russia, then Russia would not have done it. So the NATO is actually the problem. And now we see Sarah Wagenknecht saying that we have to abolish the NATO, for example. And so they are more like, what is our, like, they use Russia because the common enemy is actually America and all what it stands for, and Western standards, or what's like what they perceive as Western stuff, and his fight against the West. So yeah, this is like this very emotional, rational stuff that is also used by different medias. During the war, like when the war started, we saw a lot of propaganda. Like you have to imagine those people only inform themselves, for example, at Telegram, like the social, like this messenger stuff, or in other, or with other medias like alternate, we call it alternate media, or even right media, where they inform themselves, and they are actually fooled with Russian propaganda. And so I don't think that it's over or exaggerated, but it's part of the reality.
I would like to ask you, when you talk about the past and the impact of the past, well, that was more than 30 years ago. We have young generation. Where does the young generation, how do they relate to this past? I mean, they were born afterwards.
Well, we have to understand that, of course, it's 35 years ago, but it's imprinted in the family. So you grow up in, of course, with your parents who have their, I don't say like every parent or for example, I grew up with parents who were like, who made something of them. They used the 90s my mom opened a shop, my dad had his own firm, they started something. And if you would ask my father, he doesn't understand this whole East-West German discussion, because he said you were able to make something of yourself. And that's how I grew up. And I had to learn through my job. Well, yeah, my dad wasn't one of the people who like worked at these huge companies, or in like was a steel worker or something, and just lost, like suddenly his work was gone, but also his like everything surrounding like him, like the social life he was, and the States, everything was gone. So you would say, like people say, or like scientists say, that there's this how do you say, trauma imprintation. So it's next generation trauma. So you would give that away. And of course, you will like grow up with your parents telling you this. And as the society being as it is right now, you're getting a lot of input. And also regarding younger generation, for example, it's perhaps interesting to know that AfD was voted, like when for 5 years ago, we had a lot of young people actually voting in federal elections. And also 2001, when we had the general election, young people were mostly voting the Green parties. But then we had the Corona pandemic. And as you perhaps all know, like AfD parties like this, they feed on anxiety. So there was a lot of anxiety going on with these young people. So, and now I guess this is like the result, like all from this all very difficult or like this, that's my different explanations for something that is very complicated.
I have two more questions, and then we can open for the audience. When we talked to prepare this talk, you said to me, it seems that no matter what the other mainstream parties do, they cannot win the voters. That's one thing. And another thing is also, you mentioned so often, and even now, emotions. Which are these main emotions that AfD plays with or manipulates or addresses?
the main emotions is like anxiety, which I totally understand. I mean, when we are all here together, like during the Corona pandemic and also when the war broke out, I think we can all agree that we feel like helpless, kind of, because we cannot, or we were anxious. And regarding the war, I'm also helpless because I don't have a solution, and I totally understand if people are concerned whether a war would come here or not. I just have to accept that people feel this way. And what the AfD is doing, they, of course, they are all like also losing, like, I want to state, for example, that in East Germany, we're not talking about people, because I said people were losing this much, but they gained a lot over the years. So building houses, having their own properties and stuff, but now they're really afraid, which is also very understandable, but also kind of irrational, because right now there is no, this is actually perception that right now they could lose the stuff. And this is something the AfD is playing with, and they turn it around because they give like easy solutions, like the migrants, and we just have to deal with Russia and stuff like this, and then it's very easy, and we will turn everything backwards, so you don't have to change. So this is like the promise they make, and they also give you a very strong narrative. Because they say, if you support, look how everybody's afraid of us. Look how everybody's afraid of us. They are stating us right-wing extremists and stuff like that. So if you support us, you're like piece of a resistance. You're part of a resistance, like in the 1989. So it's like back then when people took the street and overthrow the system. And this is very powerful and very emotional. And I mean, I feel like when I stand there, sometimes it's like, yeah, this is a great, like, you can imagine, like, this is a great feeling. Now I'm just standing here. I'm part of this resistance, and perhaps we're gonna overthrow a system. This is very strong. And and the other parties, the strength of the AfD is like the less strength, or the weakness of the other parties, because for the last years they were always just looking to this party, like growing and growing, being anxious, especially the conservatives, and not being able to produce a counter narrative to give people kind of the feeling we're taking care of you. Or perhaps we have not the solution now, but like kind of communication, like there was a lack of communication in the past years, I guess, not being honest about things and not explaining well enough to people what is going on. And now, yeah, we're in this situation where like all the other, like, Social Democrats, the Green Party, the Left Party, of course, and the Liberal Party, they are in decline, and the conservatives always trying to level with AfD. Like, okay, we have to be the stronger party than them. So everybody's just looking at AfD right now.
Thank you. I will ask, I was going to ask about media, but Daniela is an expert in media. So Daniela, please go ahead.
Anthony, I'm very interested in two aspects. The first one is, can you tell us a little bit how it is to report from the ground? For example, from the rallies, or how do people perceive you as a journalist? And the second is, which we were talking in advance, could you go a little bit deeper into this parallel universe of media and information, and where do people get their information from?
So, for example, like, yeah, as I said, I was we have a lot of rallies in the last years where I went to. And for me, example, during the Corona pandemic, I kind of got actually you have to see, when I go there, I'm not with the camera, so people don't really see me. If you would go there when I see colleagues with cameras going there, like from TV, or if they have a microphone, you're very visible. I'm not very visible because I only use a phone. I don't take like notes on a notepad or something. I'd only use a phone. But still, if you would go there, they would call you out. Like I had this when I went to a rally, which was against migration, like a house. They wanted to rebuild a house where asylum seekers would come in. Right now, you have a situation where you have rallies that are like where a lot of neo-Nazis also are taking part. So they would like very loudly call you out, like, and you have to imagine it's dark and you are in a little city and walking there. and they would like point you out. So you're visible, and then you have all these comments. And right now, I think like Lügenpresse, like it was in the 2014, this is, I have to say, it's a nicer thing they would call you.
Excuse me, for those who don't speak German,
Okay.
Lügenpresse means
Lying press, like we are the lying press. That's something that is actually common right now. And people would tell you, oh yeah, you're part of the system. Yeah, it doesn't matter how, like, whatever we tell you, you will do whatever. Like, I mean, you're controlled by the state and part of and controlled by the system. I mean, I really, and you have not, sometimes you don't even get into AfD events, even if they're like public, and you actually have the right to get in. So you really have to fight to get in. I had the situation where I really had a huge discussion, and I was called out during the event, like, okay, like the media is our biggest enemy, or there's someone here. And my approach to it, which is like, afterwards, I always feel very bad about it, but it's the only way how I get people still to communicate with me is being casual about it, like saying, oh, yeah, my name is Antonie Rietzschel. I'm from the local media, and I'm looking for people talking to me. So if you want to talk to me at the end of the event, I'm very open to that. So I would try to turn this around, like this aggression. But when I go home, it feels really bad. Like I feel like, okay, I had to play an act, and actually in my inside it looks very different now, because it's hard on me, and yeah, and they are trying to prevent me to go in. So this is like, I've never been attacked or something, but it's more a psychological thing. If you would go to these rallies, where you never knew what's gonna happen and stuff, it's more psychological thing, and people are getting more, yeah, how do you say, even if you want to talk about very easy things, not even at rallies in general, like you're looking for someone to talk about, I don't know, something economics, people are very towards the media. They are very, how do you say, misstrauisch.
They don't trust the media.
They don't trust, they think you want something bad, you want to like put them in a bad light and stuff. And regarding the alternative media, yeah, so we have all these Telegram channels. I have my mobile phone here. It's like I only use Telegram for all these channels where the people are informing themselves. And I always call this like the feed of hell, because it's like every second this ping, 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 and all these messages coming in, like, because they have their own, like, of course they put in their own messages, but they're also using like Auf Eins, I think is an Austrian media outlet. It's a TV and radio station, and they're also here. They're very active. For example, they went to the party event, like during the elections Saxonia at the evening when the AfD had their event. Auf Eins was there doing interviews and being very excited, and they are here at the rallies. But we also have like Compact Magazine, which is a huge media outlet now. They tried to, like the state tried to forbid it, but it didn't work. And they have a huge media outlet, like and there's this interaction of like these Telegram stuff where they would just send like crazy, like their messages, but also using media from Identitäre Bewegung, like the right-wing extremists coming from Austria, actually also have their own like kind of media outlets here, and like sending this, and Compact Magazine and Auf Eins. Then we have news, which is like, I don't know if you ever heard about it, but there we had this chief editor from Bild Zeitung who left Bild Zeitung, and he opened up his own media outlet, which is called News. And the problem with news is it's mostly digital, but so they have their own like channels, video channels, and they have their writing outlets and stuff. And the problem is that conservative politicians also give interviews to news, like our minister, like our president from Saxonia, he goes there for interviews. And because he thinks that he can like win over, I don't know, voters. And it's nothing, it's not about facts. They just exclaim stuff. And it's so easy also for our conservative politicians to just position stuff there. For example, our minister, how do you say, federal minister, like our president from Saxonia, he was just like sitting there and like talking about that asylum seekers are going home, like talking about asylum seekers, that actually nobody's coming here has actually the right to state asylum, which is not true, but he could state it there. And so this opens, like, this is very dangerous, playing like with politicians with this kind of media. They want to get voters, but at the same time they fuel or support like fake news actually.
But let me ask you, how do they, the far right, AfD, do they appear in mainstream media?
Oh yeah, they do. They do a lot. So the problem is a little bit in the past years, like the mainstream media, I don't like, but what the talk shows, for example, we have, they are mostly, that's also like the difference between East and West journalists. So for example, we know how, for a long time now, we saw how AfD is working here. And but the TV talk shows are made by people who are not coming from here really. So there was this perception, oh, okay, we have to unveil the mask, like we have to unveil the person behind the mask. The thing is, they don't really hide. So, but still there was this competition, I had the feeling, between talk show hosts. So who is the better interviewer? So so they were always inviting the leaders of the party all the time to interview them. And of course it didn't really work because they used the screen time for their own positions. And they also they want to be in the mainstream media, because they use this to show their own supporters how the media is treating them. Like, oh, look how the questions they're giving us and how hard they are on us. And then they react also towards the journalists. Like when I was at the party meeting after the election in Saxonia, they were like showing the interviews with Björn Höcke about who I was talking about, and Alice Weidel, like screening with the state media. And they were like really aggressive towards the journalists, because the journalists were asking critical questions. So they were very aggressive. Yeah, sure, of course you had to say that. Okay, why are you always interrupting me? So that's how they appear. And the people interaction in the room was like, it was like rooting for, like, if it was a fight. So, and they were rooting for their own people. So that's why they appear in the public media. But then when they're not, like but still, even if they're in the public media, they would say, you never report about us. The mainstream media never reports about us. We are never invited, which is of course a lie, which is not true.
Sorry, just one question. What are their plans for the public broadcaster?
Oh yeah, I don't know if you know the German system, but so you have like for every federal country, they have their own like stations. Like in Saxonia, it's MDR. So it's possible they cannot cut the funding in general, but what they could do if they would be in charge in a federal country, they can cancel a contract, which would mean that in their country, like in Saxonia, the stations would have to close. So, and then they want their own, like they only want one station, because they say there are too many stations and too many TV and radio. So they only want one station for like reporting what they call neutral news. But right now they're not in, if they ever be in charge in Thuringia or Brandenburg, they could cancel this contract, which would mean, yeah, there would be some radio stations, TV stations canceled in Saxonia.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Samer. Please turn on the camera and ask your question. And please, the audience, prepare your questions and just turn on your camera and raise your hand. Go ahead, Samer. And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm from Spain. Yeah, that's question, but as Mariana said, for the people who don't speak Spanish, don't speak German, and we are a little bit far away, and I got really confused when I hear these comments. So we understand that they are anti-Westerns, pro-Russians, but not really Russians or pro-Russians. But I have heard that they have really relations with Israel and they are supported by Israel. And I saw some photos and videos where they was having some relations with Israel. So I got confused. They are anti-American but pro-Israelians. So what is
Thank
the
you very
concept?
much.
So it's really confused. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I think confusion is the right word for everything, because I mean they always tend to the position that would actually help themselves. So yeah, so of course, as good Germans, they would support Israel, and because they would in the officially, like, of course they don't want that there's any concern or question about like their view regarding supporting Jews, and also not supporting Palestine is of course using them or is giving them the advantage, like, because they're anti-Muslim. So of course they're not supporting in this conflict they would not support Palestine because they are anti-Muslim, because then yeah, so that, I mean, it's very hard to explain away, because we always think that this has to be rational, but there's nothing rational about these parties.
Thank you. Georg, please turn on the camera and introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mirjana. I'm actually from a board member, Institute for the Danube Region and Institute Regions of Europe. I have a question concerning this whole development. Since 1989, if you remember well, there were absolute majorities, for instance, in Saxony, of the CDU, Christian Democrats. And was it rather superficial? How come that they lost so much, actually? The other thing is about AfD. Did it start like a grassroots movement? They seem to be closer to the people, according to your explanations. If you could comment.
So
Thank you.
regarding the Christian Democrats, you're absolutely right. So Christian Democrats, I think, for example, like Saxonia in the 90s, they had like results like 55% or something, which was, of course, related to the promise of the Christian Democrats or the politics of Helmut Kohl. So because of this, they were the ones who were like supporting the reunification, telling people we will have like blooming landscapes. You will get like, people were promised like a paradise, but what they were not told, like how hard the way will be in the 90s, what will actually happen. So people, of course, trusted in these promises. So when you see the decline of the Christian Democrats is also related, of course, to actually problems. In Saxonia, for example, the Christian Democrats, they made decisions that actually resulted in actual problems right now. For example, they let go a lot of policemen and let go a lot of like, because they were cutting a lot. And now we have the problem that we don't have enough police and not a lot of teachers. So that's actually from the past. So you can explain the decline of the Christian Democrats with people who are not here anymore, because you had this, for example, in Saxonia, they called our chancellor or our president like the King Kurt, because he was from Western Germany. He came here and he was like a dad. He was like he was always promising, I'm gonna take care. But these promises, of course, they didn't hold at some point. So yeah, people got frustrated with the Christian Democrats. So that's the decline. And the second part, the AfD, what the AfD did right and what the Christian Democrats totally forgot. The Christian Democrats, they got very full of themselves. They forgot that they actually have to campaign, that they need people, and they were very sure of themselves that they will always win, that it's always going on. So they got out of contact with the people actually. And the party of the AfD is a party, for example, the one leader, he's a guy, he was working, how do you say, he's a painter, not like in an artistical way, but he's a person from the, like he's a self-made man. And you have lots of these people, the conservatives actually lost those kind of people to the AfD, like people who are like have their own little firms, who would build houses and stuff. Because those are people who are like in the cities and in the villages living there, and then decided to get into a party. So they have really good connections, and the CDU or the conservatives forgot to rebuild this kind of, or other parties which were weaker in East Germany. For them, it was really hard to make this kind of connections. And of course, the AfD also worked together with other groups, like, as you said, a grassroots. It's a mix of party, but also grassroots organization. Because in 2014, I don't know if you heard about this, is Pegida, like this rally, like these protests we had. And without Pegida, like this people coming together, protesting, networking, actually getting together, building groups and organizations, the success of the AfD would not be thinkable, because that was like the place where they would come together and get together. And
Thank you. Isabel,
Thank you.
please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Leonie. I'm Isabel. I'm an independent Germanist from Germany, living in Germany now. I have a question about, I'm still confused as to why the attitudes toward Russia seem to be so different in Eastern Germany and in countries such as the Baltic countries, Estonia. I mean, those two countries do share similar experiences with Soviet occupation, and yet, you know, there is this idealization, as you say, and I've noticed this myself, and I'm still confused as to why it is so strong.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know it's very confusing, but I cannot say more than I already said, because it's like this. Here, the trust in institutions into a state, they are more, the trust is not really there. So this is like how do you say? So like there's a different, in general, there's like,
trust is a good word, because the Estonians have a lot of trust in their government.
Yeah. So So trust is a very important word. And in East Germany, people tend to, it's also what the science shows, is that they tend to have a more way to authority. Like they would prefer like a lot of people would prefer a strong leader. So they like strong leaders. There's also kind of so they, like Putin, they always had this kind of view towards Putin, who was before the war, that he's like a strong leader. I mean, if it comes with criminal stuff and anything, they would just block that out. And also there was this relationship with Putin in the past. Putin would come to Dresden, for example. He was invited to balls. He would even get a prize. Like they really, like, there was this very strong connection, especially between Dresden and Russia and Moscow. There, like, this connection that they celebrated very strongly, and towards the people, so they like a strong authoritarian leader, so they look up kind of to Putin. And I think you should not underestimate the strength of like propaganda. Like if they don't have trust in the state, or if they don't have trust in the government, why should they trust what the government is telling them? Why they say, why don't we do negotiations between Ukraine and Russia? I mean, this is like a point you could always make, but the way they tell it is like, or AfD is telling it, for example, is that there are actually no efforts being made and that Ukraine doesn't want it, which is, I don't know. I mean, I'm always saying like, okay, I have no insight what the government does. You don't have insight what the government, I have no idea. And I trust, I'm trusting the government that they're kind of trying to make, like, if there's a window of opportunity to do these negotiations, that they would do it. But if you don't trust the government and if you don't trust the state, of course, you're open to believe, of course, at this point, they are not making any effort. And also what I said, like, putting all the feelings towards America in this like, just choosing a common, like, making a common enemy my friend because he's the enemy of my enemy. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I know it's very confusing for me. It's for everybody. It's very confusing.
I think you're right about everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, they think that, for example, America is still, like, because we have this military bases here in Germany, so they think that we are still, like, under the control of America. That's what they actually think. That's a thought that is very old and that was only thought by a very small group. But now we have all these rallies where they say, "Ami, go home," you know, which is in a very wide population right now, like, which was only a small group actually supporting this. But now it's very, because you have all these alternate media who are pushing this, and the AfD pushing it, and you have Sarah Wagenknecht pushing it. So you believe it. It's a belief system.
Thank you very much. Ivan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Antonie. Really fascinating insights. My question is about the others who do not vote for AfD. So yes, AfD gets the greatest number of votes, but the majority of voters still vote for the mainstream parties, CDU, SPÖ, and the rest. And so my question is, how do these people react to what's going on? And then sort of the impossible question, how will the coalition be formed?
You mean the coalition between
CDU and Wagenknecht?
Oh, okay. So the other people, yeah, the problem is, so we had all these protests, like, during the years, stating, like, the plans of AfD and what they're like, please vote, don't vote extremists and stuff, and or support democracy and things. So the election time that is after that is behind us is actually was very for the Social Democrats and the Green parties was very dominated by this thought. And I think this is also a problem, because we didn't talk actually about the actual problems here in Saxonia, for example. It was very moral. It was a very moral discussion. And yeah, and also it was very fueled by what was happening on the federal, not in the federal, but in the general government. Like, we have the coalition of SPD, Green, and Liberal Party. And in the past months, they didn't make a lot of, like, even for people supporting these kind of parties, were not really, yeah, I don't know. They were like always fighting, and there was like always problems, and they were not making a position where you would thought, okay, they would solve any problems. So it's hard for those people right now who are supporting these kind of parties to trust in institutions, parties. So that's actually what I think is the most problematic now, that these majority that you're talking of right now is also losing trust into institutions and into parties they actually support. I think that's the biggest problem right now that we have, that they would solve problems, because their reaction to the success of AfD right now is like being very headless, like they're getting pushed by the conservatives and the AfD regarding questions about migration. And so they disappoint their own people actually right now, because they're trying to press very hard legislation. So I don't know how this is going to go forward, because these parties and also the conservatives, they're not able to present their own vision, like what they actually want to do in the future. They only react to what the AfD is doing. And this is the big problem. Yeah, they don't seem to be like sitting down and being like, okay, what do we do now? Like how do we get our people? So I don't know how the elections next year is going to turn out for them. And regarding the coalitions, BSW and CDU, so for those people who are not here in Germany don't know the situation, you have to imagine in Saxonia and Thuringia now we have negotiations between Christian Democrats and a former communist, like to just saying it very easily, like Sarah Wagenknecht, she was part of the communist platform in her party in the past. So this is actually a red line for Christian Democrats, especially in East Germany, because they went into this party during the GDR times because they wanted, like, they didn't want to do anything to do with the communist government, and they are Christians, and now they have to talk with a communist, what they would say is a communist, but they understand, it's very hard, but they understand that that's the only solution. And my prediction is that, for example, in Saxonia, these coalitions will not stand very long. And that's actually paying into the plan of the AfD, because what they want is that the Christian Democrats are crumbling, and they will lose with these kind of coalitions. And so then at some point, the big time or the time of AfD has come to gain more power and getting even in the government.
Thank you so much, Gudrun, and then Ranko. Actually, let's get one after the other because we have 5 minutes. Gudrun, could you please introduce yourself and go ahead? Gudrun?
Yes. Sorry. I will be very brief. I have really a problem to understand this.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, Gudrun Steinacker, former German diplomat. I spent many years in the Balkans and also several years in Russia, but I also had already contact in GDR via the cooperation of Catholic student organizations in the 70s and 80s. And I remember a visit in the 80s in the GDR.
Please ask the question. We have only 5 minutes left.
Yes, the question is, how does it come that this pro-Russian narrative, which, as we know, is fueled a lot by Russian state propaganda, is so successful? Because in GDR, Soviet Union, Russia was very unpopular until the change of the system, until the fall of the wall.
Thank you so much.
How does it come? I don't understand.
Thank you so
As
much.
I already said, it's very irrational and it's hard to understand, but you don't have to, as you gave the answer yourself, which is fueled by propaganda. And as I said, people here turn away from public media and they turn to this propaganda and they are getting fueled by these kind of information. And so they try to find an easy narrative. So, and as I was trying to explain, is that they it's not pro-Russian, it's anti-Americanistic. It's not pro-Russian. It's just they just use the flag, but actually it's about being against America.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Ranko was there asking a question, or he disappeared. Okay. Well, if we don't have Walter, please go ahead. Well, sorry, Ranko first, then Walter, but one after the other, and then Ranko, please go ahead. No, Walter?
Okay, thank you. I would like to jump back to the meta level for a moment. You already mentioned the psychological aspects and how the atmosphere affects your journalistic work personally. And you also said that you personally were not attacked so far, but how is about physical attacks in general and direct threats, for example, by email? How is the situation, and are you expecting any changes after the election?
Thank you very much.
The journalistic
Ranko,
work.
go ahead, and then Antonie, answer both questions. Go ahead, and please introduce yourself. Go ahead. No? Okay. Well, in that case, Antonie, please, could you reply?
Well, perhaps I was making, even if I wasn't physically attacked, I feel psychologically attacked. And if I tell people, like colleagues from West Germany, what is like, because I have been sued, for example, I have been sued, and the thing, for example, you're not getting into public spaces, or them like AfD trying to prevent you to get into public spaces, fuels insecurity. Because afterwards I felt like, okay, perhaps I should have like applied before, and so I was insecure about it. And when I was at a conference in Hamburg, and I was asked whether I feel like if people are trying to undermine my work, I was like, nah, no, it's not that bad. And then I was telling them the stuff, and they were like, everything you just said is they try to prevent you from working. So everything is very harmful. And this means that we as journalists here in East Germany, we are kind of used to it. And we always have to remember ourselves that this is actually that they are trying to prevent our work. And this is also something we have to do in our redaction where I work, where people have not this high level of perception. They always think, yeah, okay, if they say that, then it must be true. So I'm getting attacked with lawsuits and getting attacked with words, and this is gonna get worse because and like in general now we have this mood because everywhere you go, everybody just, if you say I'm a journalist, everybody has an opinion about it. So nobody thinks that I am actually a person. I'm also like always part of a system, so they actually can treat me any way they want. They can tell me anything they want. What I was always trying in the past was like confronting me as a person. For example, I'm speaking dialect. I was always like telling, oh yeah, I'm from a small village too. And this works to some amount, but it's not working anymore this well. Gladly, I'm not getting attacked via email. Of course, it's not really threatening, but of course not really nice words. The good thing is that in Germany and also in our redaction, you have this thing that is called helpline, where you could, if you're psychologically, like if you're mentally not feeling stable at your work right now because of whatever reason, that you could call there and get coached. And I did this as well, trying to help myself to get a line between all the stuff, that I'm not taking it personally, that I'm not taking it home with myself. But I see it's getting harder and harder actually, because I cannot make myself free from what is happening and that I'm actually an enemy. And they are making this very clear.
Before I pass the word to Daniela for the end, I just have one question. Is it possible to restore trust in the institutions, or West Germany has failed East Germany?
I think the East Germans has always also failed themselves, because actually there are a lot of things that they can be proud of, and they can also they underestimate how much freedom they have and what they could actually do with this freedom with themselves. And I understand also, but they're also like kind of course, there were things that were made wrong. But I mean, how long do we want to dwell on these things? Because they're in the past. I mean, somehow we have to move forward with all this stuff. And what was the second question?
Is it possible to
restore the trust into
institutions? Restore the trust.
In the past, I really tried to be an optimist and always looking for solutions. But right now, I don't know how. I mean, I think the importance is the trust of those people who are not voting for parties who are fueling from people who are not trusting these institutions like AfD or Sarah Wagenknecht, and to get their trust back. I think that's the important thing, and to look to them and not. And yeah, perhaps some other people from AfD, I don't say that they are like all right-wing people, but there are still people perhaps who can be won, I don't know. But to restore, yeah, I mean, it's impossible to gain my trust. So I think there are other people who are able to get trust again, yeah. I hope so.
I thank you so much. And this was like, I would say that the talk with you was a perfect example how important it is to be on the ground and understand the local perceptions that have or do not have anything to do with facts. Thank you so much, Antonie. Daniela, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Daniela?
Thank you also from my part, Antonie, for your input, but also for your very important work Thanks a lot at this point.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to announce that on October 8th, we will have a talk with Joel Simon, and he's the former director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and he wrote a very interesting piece in Vanity Fair about what the second Trump term would mean for the media. So we are again focusing on this question, how journalists can work or are hindered to work, and which obstacles there are. But now we've heard about the AfD and also about the Austrian influence with Auf 1 TV, and I think we can all learn a lot about, from you what's going on and how important it is to protect the press as well on the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody. Thank you.
And thank you, Mirjana, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.